In the previous lecture, we looked at vertically integrated organizations and looked at their governance structures, which is like functional, product based, and it can be process based, it can be matrix, and so on. So, we gave several examples. In particular, we talked about two important examples, which is Zara, which is although vertically integrated, it follows different lines of business, and a highly successful company in the fashion industry. The other one is Cemex, which is a cement company. Its business model is to supply building materials rather than just cement. Now, what we are going to look at is networked organizations, which are basically organizations of groups of companies which are under independent ownership. So, basically a number of independent companies, each concentrating on its own business, form an alliance towards a specific goal, performing activities along the value chain, acting together as a single corporation. It is as though it is a single corporation, but one is doing the supplying, another doing the manufacturing, another distributing, another retailing, and so on. So, they are all, it's a sequential process that is followed, and all of them are collaborating towards the success. And partner selection, coordination, and control are three parts of the governance of the global value chains. When it becomes important to look at the governance when you have so many independent companies. So, somebody produces cotton, somebody does sewing, somebody produces zippers, and so on, but who will put them all together? Who tells them to what zipper for what? Is it for a trouser, is it for a shirt, or is it for a coat, whatever. So, basically one need to find out, depending on the design, depending on the manufacturer, and so on, you have to select the partners and coordinate their activities, who does what, and also control them whether everything is going right or not. You have to monitor and control for quality, for the price, for everything that goes wrong, and so on. So, that becomes an important this one. What is coordination? Coordination involves deciding and keep this one like product definition. What is the kind of product? If you are producing shirts, what is the design? What is the color, and so on. So, basically specification, technology to be used, and production schedules and location, quality systems, labor mix, environmental standards, and targeted price, and communicating to the partner. So, basically everything somebody has to do this and then coordinate, tell to the partner. It is so. This kind of coordination is needed in network organizations. In vertically integrated organizations, there is it is authority. Somebody, a design team of the organization decides, it's approved by CEO gives an order, and everybody follows. But here, you have independent organizations. So, that's where coordination becomes a bit risky. So, here is a picture of a network structure of a garment company. So, you have all the suppliers around the world, and somebody does the design according to this one, and there is advertising and marketing, and then distribution, and so on. So, this is a typical this one. So, there are two kinds of network governance mechanisms that integrates multiple autonomous, diversely skilled parties to create complex products or services meeting time and quality requirements. So, what are the network governance? There are three types of governance structures generally. One is what is called hierarchy. Coordination and control of production related to the activities is internalized to the firm. In other words, hierarchy is like a vertically integrated firm. The other one is markets. Just leave it, don't coordinate anything, you leave it to the markets, and markets independently produce the markets. In other words, if you are producing zippers, you go and market it, whoever buys it, or you take an order from somebody, and then you basically go and sell it, but there is no coordination here. In the network structure, interactions takes place through networks of companies engaged in mutually supportive actions. One party is depend on the resources controlled by another, and their gains to be held by pooling of the resources. So we are talking of a network structure which is sequential, and they collaborate and cooperate and so on. So this is not either markets or something, it comes between hierarchy and markets. Network governance is a distinct form of coordinating economic activity which contrasts with markets and hierarchies. So that's about the theory of this, which between the hierarchy and markets, and the networks come in between. So there are what are called integrators in this. Integrator is either a original equipment manufacturer or a proprietary technology owner, or a financier or a trader who basically develops strategy, conceives a winning products, and coordinates workflow among all the parties, trains the human resources, and helps in the event of trouble. Well, these are the kinds of functions that one need to do, and that's what the integrators does. So auto manufacturers such as Chrysler use their buying power and size to their network's advantage. Right? So basically their advantage is to sell their cars. The network's advantage is to give everybody who is in the network their business. Apple uses proprietary technology as a leverage and protects itself through non-complete or non-disclosure agreements and moving rapidly to new technologies. So when you are assigning or outsourcing something, giving to somebody, then there is a possibility of somebody stealing your intellectual property. How do you protect yourself from the intellectual property? One of the ways is to rapidly change these properties. I mean, Apple moves from one product to other quite rapidly before somebody else imitates that. And their financiers, investment brokers, have been traditional integrators, and information owners like bookstores, supermarkets, chain stores, their closeness to the customers, they leverage their closeness to the customers. They basically become the integrators. Sometimes the bookstores, they tell the authors what to write the book and what topic and so on. So Benetton, Nike, and Crisco, Mark and Spencer are best known network integrators outside the auto industry. So there are other integrators in this. So basically the idea is to look at is there is somebody outside. When there is a network, one thing is to leave it to the market forces. The second thing is there is somebody either inside, outside, who should tell people what to do and so on. Somebody who takes the responsibility for this. So there are basically what are called channel masters. I'm just introducing all the terminology which is available, and then before I get into my own this one. So the channel master is an enterprise within a supply chain that has compelling control over the sales of products. Like for example, General Motors, Ford, Daimler, Chrysler in automotive manufacturing, top 3 automotive compared 73.7% of the annual vehicle sales. So they become channel masters. Why are they channel masters? Why do people listen to them? Because 75% of the annual sales are controlled by them. So the suppliers and the logistics providers in the auto industry, because they command respect from this. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Cadbury, beverages and soft drinks, top 3 manufacturers 80% of soft drink market. Dell Computers commands the largest share of desk PCs. Cisco, leading manufacturer, owns electronic infrastructure of the supply chain. And Walmart, mass retail, biggest customer account of most CPG companies, requires vendors to operate and so on. So basically these are channel masters. They get the power from their market size or their market share. So this is just an introduction to the governance. We looked at the integrators, markets, and so on. Let's try to get into what is governance and how do you actually give some theoretical underpinnings of governance, and how do you model what is the mathematics that is used. So let's look at some theoretical aspects of governance. what are the features of governance? Good governance, this one. So, it identifies and manages relations with the government, trade, social groups, labor, resources, and B2B and B2C logistics companies, right. So, in other words, it is a network having say thousands of companies. So, you have to identify the relations with the government, with other within the companies, with the trade and other social groups, labor and so on. And if you want resources, those resources. And it has to build the business models and relationships for growth enhancement. So, what is the business model? You are selling direct, you are selling through this one, or you do it everything yourself, or you want to basically outsource some of this. What are the relationships that you want to have with other countries, joint ventures, FDI, foreign direct investment, or you want to do something. So, there are several decisions that needs to be made. Build systems for effective communication, collaboration and coordination among the network partners. So, everything that is done has to be transparent and shared among people. So, you have to have the ways of communicating with people. Identifies and categorizes the risks of various ecosystem sources and puts in place risk mitigation strategies and operational readiness. Well, so there, I mean, everything goes well, it is fine, but there's sometimes the risk of something happening, from a truck failure as simple as that to some earthquake in one of the supplier countries, to sovereign debt of another country, and so on. Several things which are unforeseen can happen. High probability or low probability, whatever events can happen. So, whenever these events happen, you have to take care of them. What is the put the things in place? And for every customer order, select the partners, allocate the tasks and responsibilities, and form a network. And ensures that labor laws, environmental standards are followed. You know, there are laws regarding women labor, the child labor, and so on. And also, you cannot pollute the atmosphere, the carbon, GHG gases, and carbon footprint. These are all important things that one need to follow. And he has a control room for monitoring and execution of the planned activities in a timely manner, both normal and abnormal conditions. So, under normal conditions to check the quality of the product, and abnormal conditions to check about expediting and doing other things and so on. So, these are all the features of a network governance model. So, whenever whatever is the one you have to suggest, or whoever is the one who has to follow all this. And talents, so what are the talents that are needed? Can anybody be a CEO and all this? Deep domain knowledge. Now, you are treating of your a network, you are considering a network which is globally distributed, and it has to be technology enabled, so that, and also whatever is the vertical, whether it is oil, gas or steel or auto or electronics, you have to have deep understanding of the processes, and also intellectual property relating to the products, processes and so on, you should know. And management of procurement, acquisition, partner selection, monitoring, supervision, visibility across the supply chain, of course. Relationship management. In other words, you have to have good relationship with your suppliers, with your distributors, with your retailers, with your customers, big customers, governments, and all the resource suppliers like electricity, water, human resources, education institutions, and all that. I mean, this is a huge task. And capabilities to identify, continually redesign and manage processes to changing market needs. This is an important thing, particularly if you are a technology oriented company. Technology changes. So, as they change, your products get outdated. So, you have to think of new products and so on. And human resources, training, mentoring and performance evaluation. So, these are the kinds of talents that are needed in the supply chain governance. So, let us look at the global supply chain networks and inter-organizational networks. Now, there what are called social networks. Now social networks are usually we look at social networks like Facebook, LinkedIn and so on, which are person-to-person networks. Now all of us have accounts on LinkedIn, you're linked to one person to the other. But what about companies? Can the companies, all transport companies, are they on this order so that they can communicate, they can exchange information of the state of the art, they can also collaborate, this one and all that. Is it a transport Facebook? This one, it's possible. But it is inter-organizational, that's called inter-organizational network. Like people's network is a social network. You have inter-organizational social networks, like you have hospitals, small hospitals, big hospitals, they link together. You have logistics companies, all the trucking companies and so on, the third party, fourth party logistics players, they link all these people, the trucking, warehouses and all that, and that becomes an inter-organizational logistics social network. And similarly, supply chain is an inter-organizational network. So instead of persons, you have organizations which are involved in the social network. So in the global networks, network of companies forming a goal of this one, inter-organizational social network with strong or weak ties. In a social network, you have two kinds of ties, either weak ties or strong ties. The strong ties are Karasu, Shareball and Gongxin. These are all strong ties in the sense the supplier and the manufacturer, or the distributor and the manufacturer, they are basically having very close ties. In other words, the manufacturer invests in the supplier, it provides the intellectual property, and probably the supplier's people are there in the manufacturing this one to find out the requirements and so on. So there is a close relationship between them, and this is the one that is followed in several countries. And there are lots of advantages to this. You have a long-standing relationship, so trust builds up between these two people, so there is no theft of intellectual property and all that. But the strongest disadvantage, particularly with so many disruptive technologies coming, is the suppliers may soon get outdated. Their products may become outdated. So either you have to train them to become update them, or help them to become modern and so on with the new technologies, or you have to move out. So, but the buyers may feel socially obligated for the partners. So that means you are thinking that since you have a strong relationship, you have to update them or still keep buying from them and so on, and ignore more competent newcomers. So that's one thing that usually happens, particularly when technologies are changing so fast. It becomes it is like having a cottage handloom versus a machine controlled handloom and so on. So basically the social obligation is one issue with strong ties. But on the other hand, if you are buying from the market, well, you have arm's length relationship. In other words, as long as somebody supplies, that's fine. But if you don't supply high quality ones, and if you don't have the technologies, then I'll move to somebody else. So this is the kind of weak ties arrangement that you have, and can severe ties if not competitive. So what happens to the partners? It incentivizes the partners to be on the cutting edge cost of innovation, otherwise they will be fired. So when you are looking at these global supply chains from the perspective of social networks, you get very interesting results, because in the inter-organizational social network literature, which was basically concentrates on small linkages between small hospitals, big hospitals, and also the educational institutions, and so on. They are called loosely coupled systems. But here, when you apply it to supply chains, it gives you interesting results. So you have either strong ties, like the Japanese model, or a weak choice, that is, it's entirely up to the market. If you are not competitive, I won't buy it. It is like buying it on the web or through an exchange and so on. So, tension between weak strikes and talk right. So, what do I follow? Should I have a trusted relationship or should I have arm's length relationship? So, what do I do? So, that is a tension that people have to. There are three types of network governance that is followed. So, what is the network governance model? Highly centralized external broker. In other words, there is a fellow, I mean Li and Fang is this one, Volume International in agriculture. He is highly centralized external broker. In other words, he doesn't own anything, any manufacturing or anything. He is not a part of this, but what he has is the connections. He has the connections with the retailers to get the orders. He has connections with each of the suppliers in each of these countries. He has government connections. He has connections to choose the logistics players. He has connections with the banks to get the financial help if needed, any of these partners need. That is one model that we have. So, this is a highly centralized broker model or an orchestrated model that is gaining importance now. And there is another one is participant shared governance model by electric board. Healthcare is one example. This group of hospitals come together and they have a board with this one. Dairies usually, because they are small players as well as this one, and cooperatives are the ones where they have an elected board. They have lots of members who are partners in this, but they have an elected board which manages the entire thing. And participant shared governance with a lead player. So, instead of an elected board, so one of them becomes a lead player, like an integrator. So, either then here there are two types. One is producer driven or buyer driven. Producer driven or the manufacturer driven, which means that it is like Cisco, Nike or General Motors or something, where you have this producer driven participant governance models, and it can be buyer driven like Walmart, Levi, Carrefour or something. So, these retailers basically are the ones who dictate to the suppliers what to do this and so on. So, basically these governance models are interesting of this. These are the three things that you have. All three governance forms are in practice. As I gave the examples here, first of all, the first question is, are there only these three, this one, in terms of the networks, or there are others? You can search for others, but I don't think there are others. And which one is better? Is it possible to basically either qualitatively or quantitatively assess in a particular situation which one should I use? Well, the answer is none are proved superior. So, what we are leading to here is what is called multi-layer governance, coordination and execution. So, what is here is the governance is, what does governance mean? It's partner selection, coordination and control. So, first of all, the supply chain is an inter-organizational network. A separate chain is formed for each order. So, we have basically several of these suppliers, and the orders, as the orders come, we choose these people. And partner selection is based on the structural features. What are the structural features? What is called asset specificity, and second thing is the capabilities. Now, when you select a partner, now supposing you have a requirement that you should have certain specific types of machines, or he should have separate kind of trucks which will fit a big boiler which some electric company wants to buy. So, that is called, it becomes asset specific. In other words, and those are the features that you should take into. Relational ties with the government, social networks, cluster management, etc. So, if you, everything being equal, if somebody has very good connections, then you may choose them. And coordination, that is a partner selection, has two features, one is structural and relational. And coordination is determining who does what and when and communicating to everyone. That is mathematical. And execution is monitor the order status so that the processes work as per plan and control exceptional events. Right. So, you have three things which is governance means. One is partner selection based on the structural and relational features, and of course what you want, whatever you want to do. And third one is coordination, determining who does what and when, and having good communication with others, and execution. So, these are the three things in the governance. Let us look at what is the partner selection. Now, how do you select partners? Usually the partner selection, if you are in the ordinary case, how do you select partners? It is based on low cost. You know, somebody says 11 rupees and somebody else says 9 rupees, you select the 9 rupees one. That is the cost issue. Then there could be other issues that are needed. Supposing you can add the transportation cost. If somebody is far off, the product quality, everything being the same, then if somebody is in China and another fellow is in India, and if the manufacturer is in India, then you source from India. That means then you are worried about unit cost plus transportation cost. Right. Now, if you are basically getting either from China or from Taiwan or from Hong Kong, then you add the duties on this and also the shipping times. So, what is the kind of safety inventory that you need to keep, and what is the kind of distribution that the travel time has. So, all these things matter. And what is the kind of infrastructure, delivery infrastructure that they have at that particular port. So, the issue becomes complicated. It becomes based on the ecosystem. So, the transaction costs are costs incurred to coordinate, connect all the links to the global supply chain. And transaction costs related to finding suitable trading partners, negotiating, setting up the contract, monitoring the compliance with the selecting partner. So, basically all these costs will come in. So, transaction costs include observable costs, which are what are the observable costs? Transport, import duties, customs tariffs and other formal trade barriers. That is what I was talking about. There are also hidden costs like information gathering, negotiation and monitoring contracts, trust building, networking, risk handling, mitigation, making up for cultural differences in miscommunication, compliance with safety regulations, labor laws and so on. So, they are all the soft costs that come. So, the hard observable costs decrease with trade liberalization. The observable costs are transport costs, import duties and so on. If two countries have some kind of a trade pact, so then the trade costs can come down, the exchange this one, but the soft costs may increase. So, the hard observable costs decrease with trade liberalization and decrease in transport costs. The soft costs of social connections gains importance. So, but usually people they look at only hard costs, but their brokering and other costs and risk handling and other costs, people don't take it, but it's important to take both hard as well as the soft costs while getting the TCE partner selection. So, what are the transaction costs? Three costs of transactions affect the three characteristics of transactions affect the cost. One is what is called asset specificity, and second one is uncertainty, and third one is the frequency. I mean, frequency is easily explainable. How frequently do you need it? You want it only once, or you want it every week? So if the frequency increases, then that is a thing that you should. It's not a once in a lifetime kind of activity, but it is a daily activity or a weekly activity. And also uncertainty is, what is the uncertainty that is involved in terms of the costs, in terms of the practices, in terms of the economy and other things that matter a lot. And also the asset specificity for the particular product under consideration. Are there any asset specific machine structures you need? Do you need, for example, if you want R&D, you need specialists, say in biotech, you need specialists in software engineering. So all these things cost money. So basically you have to look at those. And transaction cost economics, TCE theory. So the TCE, transaction cost economics theory, says when transaction costs are low, use the spot market governance. In other words, you can easily connect to somebody who is the best supplier for you, and you know what is the cost of transportation and all that. You can evaluate. When it is low, you use the spot market. When transaction costs are high, hierarchy is efficient. In other words, this transaction cost is used as an example to find out whether you want to outsource or do it yourself. So if the transaction costs are high, that is, outsourcing is expensive, do it yourself. And if the transaction costs are low, then you outsource, don't do it yourself. This is the kind of thing that is used. But then it depends, what is the transaction cost? Is it the unit cost, or is it unit plus transport cost, or is it the unit plus transport plus the trade costs, or is it for any pilfering, theft and so on, you want to add the cost. So the cost evaluation becomes a bit complex. So in between market and hierarchy, there is the governance structure called hybrid. So 4 types of asset specificity. In other words, when you are looking of asset specificity, physical asset specificity refers to the mobile and physical features of assets, such as specific dies, molds, tooling for manufacture of the product. So a supplier, some manufacturer wants a particular product to be supplied from a supplier. Well, it's one of those products with the supplier already doing the machinery, that's fine. But on the other hand, it may be a new product and the supplier need to buy new machines for this. And if he buys that machine, if this particular product, this order disappears and he supplies it, the machine may be useless after that. And supposing you want to have some other warehouse or something which is asset specific, which is temperature sensitive products and all that, and when this business goes away and the temperature sensitive warehouse becomes a waste, so nobody else may need that. The other one is dedicated asset specificity, represents discrete or additional investment in generalized production capacity in the expectation of making significant sale of the products to a particular customer. So what happens is, usually in this development, you expect, supposing you are making a green product, okay, so when you supply this to the market, and if the market accepts it, then you have an immediate rise in your demand. So so you can say this particular product, since it is green, people are going to buy it, and you want to have asset specificity. In other words, you want to have capacity much higher than this. Third one is human asset specificity, arises in learning by doing fashion. through long-standing customer-specific operations. In other words, you want, for example, IT companies used to have C++ programmers or Fortran programmers for this, but those programmers once now Fortran is obsolete and they may not be useless afterwards. And site-specific assets refer to successive stages that are immobile and are located close proximity of one another so as to economize on inventory and transportation. So basically you want to have a warehouse, you want to have a supply hub, but what happens if the market goes down and there is no demand for that particular product, whatever supply hub you have had for this particular product, whether it's automobile or electronics, then it becomes a waste. So this asset specificity is an important thing, but there are various kinds. So supply chain specific assets. The other thing we are talking about is an important concept is supply chain specific assets, good relationship between members of network or cluster. Assets such as specific dies, molds and so on. Resources, the human clusters, financial institutions, ports, etc. Institutions create benefits to companies in taxes and tariffs by creating special economic zones, special universities for training, manpower, etc. And delivery infrastructure, ports, airports, railroads, highways, special trucks for carrying finished vehicles, and heavy power plant equipment such as boilers, temperature controlled warehouses, refrigerated vehicles, forklift trucks, guidance systems and so on. So some of these costs are not flexible or transferable across products or organizations. Infrastructure created, manpower trained, costs of attracting 3PLs and software providers, etc. So the point here is this, what we are interested here is in this supply chain asset specificity or supply chain transaction costs. So you have a supply chain, resources, institutions, delivery mechanisms, all these things give to cost. So we basically, based on the ecosystem, we get this one, frequency and uncertainty. Frequency of interactions between the buyer and supplier is important because they create the economies of scale. To recover the costs of specialized mechanisms created and establishing relations with partner network, it's important to have scale. If it is a one-time transaction, then your costs will be high. But on the other hand, if the costs can be, the capital costs or the sunken costs can be neutralized over scale of several product sales, then it is different. For transfer of trusted knowledge to customer exchanges. Environmental uncertainty can come from suppliers, customers, competitors and so on. The mode of governance used to coordinate partners depends on the source of uncertainty. High uncertainty recommends hierarchy. So basically this. So let's look at what are the transportation costs, that how do you calculate. In other words, we said if the transaction costs are high, then either you do it yourself or you go to the market and so on. So first transaction cost is the direct product cost, production, quality, transport and so on. That comes from the supply chain. The second one comes from the delivery, shipping, inventory, asset specific, hard and soft infrastructure. Now the asset specificity comes from for the delivery. As I said, if you have a boiler which doesn't pick the ship or the truck, then you have to make special arrangements, special trucks and so on. And also the hard infrastructure is the port, the forks, the forklifts and so on. The soft infrastructure is particularly in terms of delivery is the connections and so on. And the resources, of course, you have the clusters, humans, financial, power, etc. Now, the clusters, for example, for electronic, this one they're specific on electronics or auto and so on. So, the human also, if you are trained for a particular job, then you may not be, you are vulnerable for once the particular company disappears and so on, and the financial and power. And of course, institutions, which depends on taxes, tariffs, special economic zones, free trade agreements and social groups. All these things add up to this one. So, we know that these four are the ecosystem parameters. But one more thing that adds is the coordination costs or the broker fees. Because to coordinate all these activities and have connections with all of them, it requires the cost. So, you calculate your transaction cost. So, if you remember, why are we doing all this? We are doing all this to select our suppliers. So, you go to the supplier and say, what is the production cost? What is the delivery cost depending on his location? What are the resource costs? And what are the institution costs? And what is the coordination fees? And for each supplier, if you have say 50 suppliers, some in China, some in Hong Kong, some in India, some in Bangladesh and so on, for each of them you can see these are different. And so, you can add this coordination and other broker fees and so on and get at the transaction cost and select with the lowest, with the low this one. Once you selected all the suppliers and grouped them, then you have to do the coordination. Coordination is to bring different complex activities or organizations into harmonious relationship. So, coordination is for every order, select the suppliers, assign functions to them, such as what to supply, how it is to be produced, and product tolerances, standards, etc., and the production and delivery schedules. Right. And identifying key parameters such as the product specification, the technology and quality systems, labor, environmental standards along with targeted price, and communicating them to the chain partners. Ensuring all parties follow governmental and international organizational regulations on product design and manufacture for ensuring consumer safety, environment, and child and women labor. So, the coordination activity is basically he has to take all the international regulations into account, and it should be followed, because whatever happens, this particular coordinator is responsible. And execution or online supervisory control is, for example, if you take a fourth party logistics providers who are basically managing the end-to-end B2 logistics, they coordinate all services needed for goods transfer, and warehouse at shipper and distributor ends, arrange the trucks for all through the journey, manages the customs clearance at ports or airports, loading and unloading, cross-docking, merchant transit as required, manage all exceptions through control room, truck failure, truck registration, payments at customs, driver schedules, expediting, etc. So, execution, for example, is one of the things that the prime function of a logistics provider. That's why I gave this example. And a 4PL or a 3PL does all this. But this has to be done for the entire supply chain. That's what we, as we see here. So, the issue is you have three functions here. One is partner selection, that is, you have for all the suppliers, manufacturers and so on, you have selected partners at various groups in various countries. For example, the supplier, this can be a group in China, this can be a group in India, this can be in Bangladesh and so on. And similarly, when you want to transfer, this manufacturing may be single or multi-site manufacturing. And you have logistics providers for B2B and B2C. The distributors could be all over the world. And similarly, there is the logistics which transfers to the retailers. Retailers could be in US or in Europe, or it could be all over the world. So what happens here? You, in the partner selection, this one, you have selected all these people and then put them as groups. In other words, you have gone through, or there are some kind of a certification procedure, and there are a lot of interaction costs that are involved in searching for them and then putting them all together, but you have them. So if you are saying, I want something to be done in China, I know these are the group of people who do it in China and so on. So, and if I want to move some product from China to Singapore, Hong Kong to Singapore or something, then I know the logistics providers. So this is an Excel sheet which gives you all the information. And while doing so, I have also calculated the transaction costs for selection of this. Now, for coordination, what is that I had to do? I had to select for each order the partners. So I select the partners for each order, and based on their transaction cost, since I have all the transaction costs, I can select the one that is the best, and then tell them what to do and when, what to do, look at their whatever facilities they have and so on. And execution, of course, is control of this. So what I have here in this diagram is a model for the governance of a global supply chain, which involves all the three. Now, whoever does this, whether it is done by a broker or it is done by a participant governor, buyer driven or retailer driven, whatever you have, he has to follow all the three steps in this particular, given in this diagram. So this is called the governance mechanism for this. So I mean, frequently what is the question that is asked is, what are the mathematical models for the design of the governance mechanisms? The partner selection problem you can follow as a fuzzy AHP or a integer programming problem, or one can rank order the suppliers for each component based on their ecosystem parameters on the TC. In other words, I have told you how to calculate the transaction cost economics. You can rank order them based on the transaction cost. And coordination scheduling problems can be solved using optimization techniques. These are standard techniques that are available to solve this particular problem. But expert systems, decision support systems, case-based reasoning, and hybrid control systems are used for exception management and execution. Execution is one of the things. It's called what is also called real-time control. In other words, you have this entire process. You have to visualize the process and try and execute the entire thing. So that becomes a very complex thing. Usually BPOs, business process outsourcing outlets, are used for this. And one of the examples that we have is Genpact. It's an outsourcing company in India, based out of Hyderabad and Gurgaon, and they monitor and do all the things for a company called truck company called Penske, which is out of US. So all the things, if there is a truck failure, they handle it from here. If the scheduling of the trucks for picking up auto components from Minneapolis and deliver them to Detroit, how many trucks, who the driver, and what is the route, it's all decided by Genpact. So the issue is that this kind of this one, it will give you confidence into this one rather than just leaving it open. One thing is to plan for things and think that everything happens according to plans, but most often they don't. So it is becoming important to have this exception management and execution function into this. That's called execution in the governance, this one. So to conclude, we have dispersed small players, the service networks. They require help in formation, governance, coordination, execution for efficient, profitable product delivery. Now, what we are talking here is we have SMEs, either in apparel, either in toys making or anywhere, or auto manufacturers and so on. So basically they are all the players who require help in governance, coordination and execution and so on. So the coordinator basically has to act as a mentor also. And we have to identify and manage relations with the government, trade, social groups, labor, resources, delivery mechanisms and all that. Somebody has to be in charge to talk to the government, to talk to various people and actually have these relationships, which are becoming very important. Implementation of governance needs sensor networks, big data management and cloud computing. There is a lot of IT structure, IT infrastructure and analysis that is needed to make these things happen. So this can be used to advantage in small and medium enterprises, hospitals and cities, villages, etc. And theory development needs integration of social networks, inter-organizational theory, machine learning, optimization, game theory with supply chain networks. So what we have done in today's these two lectures is we have talked about the governance. Governance means you have an organizational, inter-organizational network and you have to make them collaborate. How do you do it? I mean, they do it within themselves by elected board, or there is a dominant player called the channel master who will coordinate the activities for the group so that everything works well, or there is an external broker. So we looked at this, but in some situations there may not be any governance of this. Now, for example, there is a small scale industry fellow, he doesn't know, he is not a part of this, but it is important he becomes a part of some global network for his business, otherwise he will become small. So basically this is a very, very important topic, that this one, the governance models, which is often ignored in the literature, both in the literature as well as in the practice, more in practice than in literature. So what we are going to do is in the next two classes is to look at some of the examples, the more detailed, the orchestration models with practical examples and so on. So thank you very much.